Public transportation benefits communities in many ways. Some obvious: less congestion, increased parking, reduced pollution, oil dependence, and greenhouse gas emissions. Some more subtle: it attracts business, raises property values, increases employment opportunities, and improves mobility for young, old, disabled, and economically disadvantaged people.
I am visually impaired, and so for me, the bus is my lifeline.
Because it goes beyond just a person getting to class or to a store or, to work. It's everything.
Moving and transportation is, I would say, the number one biggest obstacle for victims of domestic violence. We always ask, do you have a car? How are you planning on getting here? And they say, oh, I take the bus everywhere. And we have to say at that point, I'm sorry, we don't have access via a bus.
With the economic downturn of the early 2000s, Pittsburgh suffered a series of transit cuts.
I was going to school at the time when they canceled the buses, so I almost couldn't graduate from school.
My son started at 15 working, taking that bus. I live at Churchview. He walks all the way to Mount Oliver. That's an hour-and-a-half walk. His 8-hour days are 14-hour days.
A lot of families in the community were struggling getting food this winter for their family because it was so far and they didn't have money to pay someone to take them to get food.
There was the crisis of the major cuts in public transit, and those were growing cuts, and there were some young activists, some folks involved in the transit union, Amalgamated Transit Union, and others, who formed essentially a coalition. PPT essentially was a coalition to fight against the cuts.
There was a proposal in 2012 for the transit system to be slashed by 35%. And that was something that PPT came out in coalition with many other organizations to stop. And one thing we did was 12 of us blocked the intersection in front of Governor Corbett's office in downtown Pittsburgh to highlight what would happen if our transit service was cut.
There were picket lines, there were rallies, there were leaflets, there was all kinds of stuff to help build consciousness of the importance of public transit.
We also took people, worked with people to go with hundreds into the Capitol Rotunda in Harrisburg, and the elected officials kind of swarmed down, seeing all these people out there, and showed support for how important it was for a bill to be passed.
And we were able to get a broad range of people, Democrats, Republicans, Greens, Independents, and others, to agree that it was necessary to have at least some basic funding for public transit. And so we were able to stop the continuation of the cuts.
These actions resulted in Pennsylvania State Act 89, which funded public transportation for 10 years.
When Act 89 passed, Port Authority said, we don't have to make more cuts, but we can't restore the service that was cut. And we said, well, what about all the people who lost their service and are stranded? And they said, well, sorry. A few drivers knew really well places where people had lost their service. And one driver suggested a neighborhood, this is Baldwin, it's about 5 miles from the city of Pittsburgh. And we said, let's see what the response is like. We didn't know, people hadn't had their bus for 4 years. Mike Harms, the bus driver who lived in Baldwin, who drove the route that was cut, said, we just have to go knock on people's doors. We just have to go talk face to face with someone and say, what's your experience? Do you want to do something about it? And that was the foundation of this. We were pretty impressed to see all these folks come out and say, we are upset about this, we want to do something about it. And we had small group conversations where people could talk about how they'd been affected. They came up with doing a petition, lots of other ideas, including this walk for transit, where they wanted to invite decision makers to walk the distance they have to walk to get to a bus. And it was interesting, because after that first meeting, a steering committee formed, which was the kind of heart of the campaign.
And you find out that this goes back to my high school days, that you become a cheerleader. You actually are out there helping people get excited about what they really want. And they're so disappointed that they've lost service. So what you want to do is to get out there and try to instill some enthusiasm in them and say, okay, but if we band together as a group, we can make it happen.
And then from there, a driver found out about the work we were doing and said, well, I know some communities who are really affected. And she got connected with riders near Coriopolis and Moon and Groveton who rallied their own neighborhood.
Nobody else knew about it.
Yeah. Do you want to get some of these signed in Groveton? You can take as many as you want. Okay.
It took some time. We were told, no, you're not going to win, but we won.
And you went out and did all the hard work. You canvassed, you called people, you rallied in the cold and in the rain, and you won.
And you won!
So now, since Baldwin and Groveton got their service extended in September, more communities are coming out and saying, we need, maybe they're not a complete transit desert, but they are in the middle of the day. They only have morning or evening service, or they don't have weekend service. And they are now ready to say, we are glad we have this service during the weekday, but what about our weekends where it's a 7-day week, we still need to get places. And so we're really excited about the fact that people are coming out and ready to fight to get better transit service.
I'm glad that I'm able to get around as well as I do, but I cannot walk that hill.
Now, when they took the bus away, they also made me have to change churches.
Fix the budget, if you will, please, so that the elderly and the carless residents are never held hostage again. Thank you from the citizens of the Garfield community.
In September of 2016, the Port Authority will enhance service in Garfield and Penn Hills.
I'm so grateful for the Port Authorities to have done this, to have gotten the 89 bus back on schedule.
And we're going to ride into East Liberty together, and we're going to meet those individuals from Penn Hills that we've been working with, and we're all going to get together at Kelly Strayhorn and have a celebration.
It's not about PPT leading the whole campaign. The only way these campaigns work is because there were enough engaged volunteer residents. The kind of communities we're creating of people who recognize I have power with the people that I'm at a table with. If there's 6 of us, then I have power when 10 of us go to the board meeting and say something about it. And then I have power when 100 of us are on the street demanding public transit. And then the next time around, we can go demand more funding for education or better housing opportunities or combating racism or sexism or homophobia. And there's lots of opportunities once we have these strong networks of people and communities who believe in their own collective power and the need to take on the powers that be. That's a beautiful thing.